When you're a leader, it's a lot of responsibility. It can be stressful. People will criticize you. Some people will praise the very decision that someone else will criticize you for. And you have to have your goal in sight. Like, what is motivating you to be a leader?
Today, I'm sitting down with Charity Clark, former Assistant Attorney General in the Public Protection Division, former Chief of Staff to the Attorney General's office, and now the first elected woman to Attorney General of the state of Vermont. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I wanted to start it off by asking, what was the single best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, easy. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I love that one. My mom always hounds that on me.
Yes. I am your mom. Because I'm always telling people that. And I mean, I don't think I felt it ever more clearly than when I was running for office, because I found out in early May that the then Attorney General was not going to run again and there would be an open seat. That's when I found out that was my time to run for Attorney General. That was early May. By late May, all of the signatures to get on the ballot were due. So I had less than 3 weeks to get 500 signatures to get my name on the ballot. That was May 25th maybe, and the primary was August 9th. So I had to get my name out there, tell Vermont who I am, what I stand for, and I only had a couple months to do it. Oh, and I had to raise a ton of money at the same time. So I couldn't be perfect. I could only be good, and that's what I aimed for.
That's amazing. So one thing I did in a little background research is that when you took office, you did a listening tour across all the divisions of your office. And I'm very curious what value you saw. Like, why spend the time to do that listening tour?
I am still in the process of doing that because the office has 150 people in it. So I think I'm over 70% of the way done. But I wanted to meet with each person in the office individually. First, because I wanted to learn more about what each person did, and also because I wanted to find out what their thoughts were about the office, what I could do to be a good leader, their good ideas generally, but also specifically about their work. And I really wanted to get to know them better, and I make that personal connection, let them know how much I value their work and their contributions to the office, and also the work that they do, because we do a tremendous variety of work. And a lot of what the public sees is about consumer issues or criminal issues and maybe a little bit environmental issues. But that's only a portion of what the office does. We serve a lot of clients, and as attorneys, everyone's heard of the attorney-client privilege and attorney-client relationship. Well, we take that really seriously, but it's not like the super exciting, juicy stuff that you see on TV. And so the press isn't as interested in that. And it was important to me that all of those lawyers and paralegals and legal secretaries and investigators knew that their work was just as important as everyone else's, and I was sincerely really interested in it. So that's actually been a really positive part of my first few months in office. I mean, I'll tell you, in part it's because I ask the same questions of every person. And I start by asking, well, what do they do at the office? But I also ask, what do you enjoy about working here? And the overwhelming majority of people say, I enjoy my team and the people who work here, which I feel the same way. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to run to lead the office. And then the other that you hear a lot in asking that question is, it feels so good to be serving the public, and the mission of our office is something that resonates with people, and it does with me too. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have worked there for so long. It feels so good to know that every day when I wake up and go to work, my work is helping Vermont be a better place, and it's helping Vermonters, and I love Vermonters, so it's really a great place to work.
So you mentioned your team and being very in tune with your team, and I'm curious because when you took office, you kind of had to choose your team, choose the people that you're working with, and I'm very curious, what was that process like? Who are you looking for when choosing your team?
One of the things that I've thought so many times has helped me so much is that I already knew the office so well, and I knew the people who worked there so well for the most part. I mean, working remotely during the pandemic, you don't learn who people are quite as well. But I certainly knew all the people in management roles, and it really helped me when I was making those decisions about, who would be in the best role. So I think a lot of the choices that I made were based on knowing people's strengths and weaknesses and what I wanted to accomplish for each division in the office and who would be the best person in that role.
So you started off as an assistant attorney general, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that role was you'd have more specific focuses in the office. Is that correct?
Yes, I did tobacco work. Back in the 90s, the state of Vermont had a massive settlement along with every other states with major tobacco companies. And when I say massive, we get basically $23-25 million every year. And for a time, for 10 years, we got $10 million more than that every single year, an absolute ton of money, because Vermont was a leader in the effort in the 90s for that case. We needed a lawyer to manage that. There's legal work related to it that I'm not going to bore you with. So I did that, and then I also helped businesses mostly small business, in fact all small businesses, who needed help from us. They were in the role of consumer, so they were buying things for themselves and they ran into trouble, or something of that nature. And I was physically located at the Consumer Assistance Program. So I worked there I worked in Morrill Hall is when I was at the Consumer Assistance Program doing that work. So yeah, that's where I started.
So what is the transition like now, going from more individualized projects to having to manage all of these projects? What has that kind of shift been like for you? I was fortunate to, after I was an assistant attorney general, spend 4 years as the chief of staff. So I already had that management experience and leadership experience when I became attorney general. That was really helpful. I learned a lot about leadership, messaging, prioritizing, managing people, and all of that. So that was kind of my foundation. When I arrived at the post of Attorney General, I'd had that experience, and to have that experience specifically in the very office that I would be leading was incredibly helpful. So I guess what are some key takeaways then from your experience that you think are very important to that managing all these tasks?
I think good communication is really important. So not just setting expectations internally, but externally, I think is really important. Building relationships, again, internally, but also with stakeholders who are outside of the organization, I think are really important. I'm very fortunate in that I love Vermont. I love the Attorney General's office. So I bring my enthusiasm for people and for this place. That is a big part of my kind of leadership style. And if you ask people who work with me, like, yes, Charity is very enthusiastic about things, and that's true. So I'm kind of a hype lady. So if if you work under me, I'm gonna hype you up and say, like, great job, and encourage you and be excited for your wins and be sad with you for your losses. That's just kind of who I am. Knowing where your strengths are as a leader and then leaning into them is also something important, and something that I got to develop because I was chief of staff for so long.
Yeah, I think that prior experience really kind of helped shape what your time in office now.
Yeah, and you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, when you're hiring someone for a job, you look at their resume, right? You want to see what they've done up until this moment. You don't just want to say, like, well, they had a good vibe in the interview. You want to see, like, well, do they have the experience that's going to be the foundation for their work in this position? So, one of the advice that I give young people is to imagine what they want to do in 10 years, and then imagine what the resume would look like to be able to get that job. That's what I did, and now I'm the Attorney General because I was able to build my way here for a number of years.
So I guess looking at very past experience at your time at Clark's IGA, yes. Do you find that there was anything in that experience that maybe is translated into your work today?
So much. First of all, the ability to work hard it's really hard work to stand on your feet and work in a grocery store is really hard work. But keeping your eyes on the prize, so to speak, is really important. But again, there was a place where you were constantly interacting with people, and giving people grace, especially in a grocery store. They might have had a long day at work or their kids are overwhelming, and just giving them grace and realizing, maybe they're having a bad day. How can I be of service? That was a customer service oriented experience. And of course, all public servants like to have a public service oriented or community service oriented mindset to help with that, the work that you're doing. So that was a really good foundation. For me, I learned so much working in the store. I worked in the store so many hours as a kid in college, and then when I was in law school, I would go back for the busy Christmas season and I would work again. But I think being a member of the community, the experience of knowing what it is like to participate in your community and understand what your role is, that everybody has a role in their community, and that was really uplifting. But at the time, it didn't seem that way. It just seemed like, well, we're the store. People come when they need to buy things from us. We're the market here. But when I look back and I think about all the different kind of web of a community, and understanding like how fortunate we were to be in this place where there was always people coming through, and you meet people I'm sorry, I'm kind of like going on and on, but I honestly, working in a supermarket is just such a great foundation for understanding life, because sometimes people come in and they're excited, they're going to throw a party. And sometimes people come in and they've just gotten bad news from the doctor. And sometimes people come in and they're struggling and they're hungry. Sometimes they come in and they literally overwhelmed by their kids. I keep referring to that because now that I'm a mom, I so understand that experience. But it really was a great foundation for understanding people, hard work, and being a part of a community. And I think that those are values that I've carried my whole life.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're a mom now, and I'm curious how that has maybe shaped your experience as a leader.
Well, for one thing, I always am understanding when something comes up with your kid. It's like, kid got pink eye, go home. Nope, we don't need to have this meeting over Zoom. We're just going to reschedule it. You don't need to be juggling all of this. So right out front, that's definitely one, is always being understanding towards parents. And knowing that it can be hard for young, especially when your kid is a baby or a toddler, you're not sleeping well, and just always giving grace to new parents. And advocating for policies that are going to support them. So that's something that I've done. Under my leadership, we have become a breastfeeding friendly employer, for example. We now have a lactation room in the office. We have a breastfeeding policy. And I'll continue to support policies that are going to encourage, retention, recruitment, and just really reflecting our values when it comes to families. I've kind of wandered so far, I forgot your actual question.
I was just curious.
Being a mom, how it's informed. I've learned so many tricks being a mom. So this isn't even but one trick that is so helpful is when you have a toddler and your toddler is having a lot of emotions, sometimes they are acting out because they don't understand why they feel the way they feel. So it's helpful to describe it and say wow, you seem really frustrated because you can't get those boots on. And it's a relief to them to hear, oh yeah, you're right, that's why I'm frustrated. So I think sometimes I can carry that forward of just saying, wow, this person is really either upset or enthusiastic, and just naming in my own head, I think they're upset because of X. So don't, fall into the trap of getting dramatic with them. Let's keep a cool head here. So those kinds of little tricks are everywhere. When you're a parent, you learn them all the time. Communicating is really important, and I think just giving feedback is also really important, and those are things that come naturally to a parent.
Yeah. So you've brought up communicating a lot, and I'm very curious, how do you see that role? How do you really emphasize that in your office? What steps do you take?
I was, again, really fortunate to have the experience of being chief of staff, because I could see, I had ideas about we should be doing it this way, or maybe we could do that way. So when I arrived as Attorney General, I could implement some of those policies. So one of the areas that I felt was underutilized was the use of social media. And I have sort of set out to have a more robust and varied social media across all three of the platforms that we're on. And external communication is so important, but in today's day, where a lot of the newspapers, the daily newspapers that used to report on the work that government officials were doing no longer exist, or they've had to narrow their scope so much that they really don't cover, like the Burlington Free Press doesn't really they don't have a political reporter, they're not reporting a lot on what the government is doing. But I think the public wants to know, and I think they deserve to know. So I try to give updates on things that are happening. I did that this spring during the legal fights we had over the abortion drug mifepristone. I also try to use social media to inform Vermonters about scams that might be happening, or I just did a reel on propane and opportunities for folks who are struggling to pay for heating fuel. And that's one form of communication I feel like is just really important. Another is speaking in plain language. I'm going to give you an example. I was recently on Vermont Edition to talk about a lawsuit that my office filed against Meta concerning Instagram's design of being an addictive platform and targeting young users. In my description about something, I had a mental, you're on live radio, right? There's only so much you can do. And I had a mental block and couldn't think of the word harmful or another word that would be harmful. The only word I could think of was an SAT word, deleterious. And I kept being oh my gosh, this second is extending on interminably. And I can't think of a word except for deleterious. And that's a word no one understands. That's such a pretentious word. Don't say that word. And I'm I can't think of it. I gotta just use the word. And I was deleterious. And I was oh my gosh. And then later I was harmful. The word is harmful. So, using plain language, short sentences. I worked at the Cynic when I was in college, and a journalistic style is it's simple, it's easy to read. The person is eating breakfast, they're in a hurry, they don't have all day to read your article. You got to get in and get out. And I think the same with our communication. Make it pithy, make it straightforward, don't make it beautiful and convoluted. No one has time for that. Just get the information out there. So I try to, communicate in a plain language style as well.
Yeah. So looking more internally to the office, in a little research for this interview, I was looking at the strategic planning process the office is undergoing.
Yes.
And one thing I thought was interesting was, you took office in January, and this process hasn't started until now in August.
Yes.
So I'm very curious, was there a reason for that gap?
Yes. I was sworn in on January 5th. And the legislature started the day before that. So we spent the first few months of my tenure focused on the legislature. We had a few priorities that we wanted to get through. One of them was advocating for and hopefully implementing the recommendations by a commission in my office called the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission. One of the issues I ran on was domestic violence. In Vermont, we have 40,000 victims of sexual and domestic violence every year. And I felt, especially as the first woman elected to this post, that enough attention had not been paid to this issue. So when the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission came out with their recommendations, which they provide to the legislature and the governor, I had a press conference, and we worked really hard with amazing legislators who made this a priority for themselves as well. And we got those recommendations implemented. I'm so proud to say it was a ton of people worked on that. So, we had other things going on too. When the legislature left in late May or June, we began turning to other projects, one of which was the strategic plan, also getting around the state and doing some tours, meeting with people that I hadn't met with. And then the flood happened in July. So that certainly shaped our office in many ways. One, because we had work to do related to the flood. We also spent a lot of time trying to secure temporary office space. We were displaced, most of our office was displaced. So yes, and we were so fortunate, and we're still working, so I should use the present tense. We are so fortunate to be working with an office in state government who are experts on strategic planning and that kind of projects. So they are absolutely wonderful, and collaborating with them has been wonderful, but that might have affected the time frame as well.
Yeah, so I'm curious then, part of the strategic planning process is coming up with a mission and kind of a vision statement.
Yep.
And I'm curious what you find is the importance of having those statements created.
Well, I have been a part of numerous organizations that have gone through strategic planning. I just think it's so valuable. I am a goal-oriented person. I actually, during the previous strategic plan, I would analyze it and compare my work when I was chief of staff to the plan every year. I would say, okay, what are my goals this year? What progress do I want to make? And how does that connect to the strategic plan? It's really just telling you these are the priorities of the office. So if you're doing a good job, that's really the document that you're following. And the way that we're doing it this time, which I'm so excited about, is we're using a lot of data points to sort of measure our success with meeting our mission and our goals. It feels really good because that's data that's going to be out there for the public to see. We want to hold ourselves accountable, but ultimately we work for the people of Vermont, and they deserve to see what we're up to. And certainly when it comes time to elect an attorney general, to see if the attorney general is progressing in a way that you like, or what have you. So it's a really good process to be a part of, and the office has been wonderfully collaborative in the process that we've had so far.
You mentioned the floods, and I'm very curious how that shifted the goals of the office, and then kind of how you've corrected and maybe a lesson or two learned from that experience.
It's interesting because we had we did a survey of the office and getting a lot of responses, and a surprising number of people commented on, part of a strategic planning is you analyze your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And more people than I had expected mentioned, the threat of climate change to the stability of our office, the office location. I mean, people were very aware of that as a problem because it had just happened. So that was one thing, is informing our work in a way that it wouldn't have otherwise, I don't think, because people certainly referenced it rightfully, because obviously it's a problem. We've been displaced all these many months. It also has shaped what our summer looked like. We were displaced. I spent time visiting places that were impacted to see how we could be helpful with our small business advocate and others in our office. We also have a professional who is an expert on home improvement fraud and home improvement matters. That person can advise in a number of ways. One, the person who's hired someone to make improvements to their home, but also the person who is the contractor, implementing best practices and whatnot. So, we sort of set to work that way. We also, being scam experts, of course, because we're consumer experts, we immediately had to put out a scam alert because a scam was going around about a utility shutoff the very week of the flood. I'm sure scammers act in a way that they're just trying to get your money, right? So they're thinking, okay, you had a flood, you're going to need your dehumidifier, you're going to need your sump pump. We are going to pretend that we are going to shut your electricity off and try to earn money that way, which is awful. So we sent out a scam alert and put out some social media to communicate with people to be on the lookout for that, and really just tried to see how else can we be helpful. We're here to serve, and in any way we can, we want to be helpful. We also, of course, our lawyers serve the Agency of Transportation and other places in state government who are doing work related to the flood, and we're the lawyers there. So, it definitely impacted our work.
Yeah, I was going to, just in review for this, it was really neat to just see all that footage from you going out into the community, and it just, as you've emphasized, that communication piece, I think is really important.
One thing that I found, especially working in the Consumer Assistance Program, because the Consumer Assistance Program is outward facing, always talking with the public, is Vermonters really want to hear from the government. It makes them, I think that in the case of the flood, it was comforting to know we cared, we showed up, we're listening to them, we're seeing the damage, we're thinking of creatively about ways we can be helpful and connecting them with resources to the extent that we can. And I, will continue to do that. As a person who grew up in a rural place in Vermont, I mean, it meant a lot to me when someone would come and visit us in Manchester. I talk about this a lot, but when I was in maybe fourth grade, Governor Cunin came to visit my town for Green Up Day. And that meant so much to me. I've talked about it a lot. It made a huge impression on me, but also to know that, she cared, and I want to always continue that legacy of getting out into the community so that they know we care and we're here to help.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful. And looking to the office once again, you have kind of become the person. You're the one signing off on a lot of the big decisions. And I'm curious, what goes into ensuring you making the best possible decision that you can?
Well, I mean, I keep saying this, but it is so helpful that I had the foundation that I had coming into it. So I really had a wonderful sort of education due to my experience. But it also is incredibly important that I placed equally experienced and trustworthy people in positions of authority in my office. So I can rely on their recommendations, trust where they're coming from, and it makes it a lot easier to make some of the tough choices. I'm also, fortunate that I say like Vermont is the state that raised me, and that's true. So to the extent that I want to make sure that I'm doing what Vermonters want me to do and reflecting their ethos in the work that I bring to the office, it is really helpful that I've spent most of my life living here, and my family is still here.
So lastly, I kind of want to ask you, what advice would you give to aspiring leaders?
Wow, that's a very big
Yeah, it's very
question.
broad, very big.
I think the most important thing is to identify why you want to be a leader. If you want to be a leader because you want, if you're honest with yourself and it's like, well, I just like the attention or my name in the paper, or even I like giving speeches, that's really not gonna. Can I have a side moment? As you know, I have a daughter, and all of her friends went through this phase where they read this book, and the book has this concept that there are things and people that fill your bucket and things that take away from your bucket. So we in my house will say like, oh, that was a real bucket filler. We'll go to the Shelburne Museum or something. And so when you're a leader, it's a lot of responsibility. It can be stressful. People will criticize you. Some people will praise of the very decision that someone else will criticize you for, and you have to have your goal in sight. Like, what is motivating you to be a leader? It's got to be something that fills your bucket, And for me, I'm so motivated to help Vermonters, to help Vermont. I love the people in my office. They do incredible work, and I want to be their leader because they deserve to have someone who feels that way and cares for them. But getting in touch with like, why are you really doing this? Because being a leader of any organization is a ton of work. It involves sacrifices and a lot of, waking up in the middle of the night and saying like, wait, I think I've solved this problem. So knowing what motivates you and feeling comfortable in that is, I think, a great place to start.
Wow, I really appreciate the time today, and I'm really excited to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me, and you asked such great questions.